We are just a few days away from the first F1 test of the year, and like the rest of the F1 community, it's time for me to roll the dice and make my 2022 predictions. This one will be interesting, so let's have a look. My name's Andy, and this is Behind the Drive. Before I get into my predictions, I first want to offer a caveat that these are just my thoughts. We literally have nothing to go on other than a few cars that have been launched so far, and even those probably won't look the same come lights out in Bahrain. The main reason I'm doing this is so that I can see what score I'll get come the end of the season. So let me know if you disagree with any of my predictions in the comments, but make sure to be nice about it. Constructors' Championship predictions. Number 10, Haas. Starting with the Constructors' Championship, and I've got Haas in at number 10. The team has had a rough few years, dropping to the bottom of the order, and despite making the call to switch their focus to 2022 a year early, I have my doubts over this team. There have been changes at Haas, with a number of team personnel being seconded from Ferrari, as the Italian team have had to reduce their numbers with the new cost cap. So all of these are good signs, but the team is now more widespread, with inputs from their factory in Banbury, a technical team in Maranello, and the Dallara team are also based in Italy as well. Plus, I don't believe the Haas team have the strongest driver lineup, and they are lacking experience in that pairing. In terms of the car development through the year, they've historically not trusted more experienced drivers than Schumacher and Mazapin, so unless that changes, there's a lot of doubt in there too. I hope the team can take a step forward in 2022, but there has to be a team in last, and for me, it's Haas. Number 9, Alfa Romeo. Alfa Romeo next, and this team is in a position where they have an all-new driver lineup, and to be honest, compared to most other teams, they have been pretty quiet in the media about their 2022 car, and they aren't even officially launching it until after the first test. They did turn their focus to this year's car in January of last year, so much like the other backmarket teams, they've had a lot of time. They're a team that has turned to a pay driver in Guan Yu Zhou, who will bring significant financial backing with him. This means that the team may well be closer to the budget cap, with more sponsors on board and thus having more to spend on car development. Meanwhile, Bottas comes into the team on a multi-year deal with significant experience, and I think that could be really helpful for the Alfa Romeo team in the long run. Again, as with Haas, this prediction feels a bit harsh, but I don't think Alfa Romeo are going to be at the front this year. Number 8, Williams. Williams up next in 8th, and again, the reason for this is because it's difficult to predict teams making a huge leap, because as much as it could absolutely happen in 2022, it would be very bold to make the call of one of these three teams to make a leap this year. The Williams driver lineup is weakened this year in my opinion, with Alex Albon coming in to replace the outgoing George Russell. But they still have a pairing that have a good amount of experience at multiple teams, and Albon has even been racing at the front in the last few years, so that experience could prove valuable for the team this year. Number 7, Alpine. Alpine next, and I've actually recently made a video expressing my concerns over this team. The Alpine setup is one that's gone through a lot of change through the off-season, and that's where my doubts lie. They have a great driver lineup in Alonso and Ocon, but as is beginning to be a theme in this list, there will of course be teams that get these new regulations right, and some that get it wrong. For me, I'm not sure about the Alpine setup for the 2022 season. And really, they've struggled ever since Renault's return to the grid in 2016, where they failed to achieve their ambitions. Number 6, AlphaTauri. AlphaTauri next, and I'm cautiously optimistic for this team. They have a brilliant driver in Pierre Gasly, by far the most experienced and successful driver that they've had in recent times, and also Yuki Sonoda, who will be looking to build on a couple of good performances towards the end of last season. They're also a team that will be leaning on their Red Bull tyres a lot in 2022. You can be sure that they'll be able to develop a similar development path and take advantage of the parts that they can from that senior team. Number 5, Aston Martin. Aston Martin in 5th, and this is a team that should be knocking on the door of the top 4. The team is growing rapidly, and it will be all about whether they can work together to produce a quick car. They were the first team to shake down their 2022 challenger, showing their confidence, and this will certainly help them get ahead early in terms of their initial development path. Those development paths may well be quicker than they have been in previous seasons with the increased size of the team. And with Vettel and Stroll, you have two drivers with a large amount of F1 experience, so their feedback will be vital in determining that car development path. Number 4, McLaren. McLaren in 4th, and this is a team that isn't too optimistic about their chances this year. They've been on a strong upwards trajectory since 2019, and their setup is excellent with Zak Brown as CEO and Andreas Seidel as team principal. And for me, it's actually surprising that they aren't showing more confidence in their car for this season. But even so, they have a Mercedes power unit which will likely be the strongest on the grid. They also continue to have a strong driver lineup in 2022 with Norris and Ricardo, two drivers that are both capable of taking the team forwards and on to being a front-running team again. But I've kept them in fourth based on the reserve nature of the team. Number 3, Red Bull. Red Bull next, and I fear that this team spent the majority of their resources winning the championship fight of 2021. They were publicly stating that they were bringing more upgrades late on into the season to support Verstappen, and this surely came at the expense of 2022 development given the financial regulations set by the FIA. To me, this says that whilst they will have undoubtedly had teams working solely on this year's car from the off, they're potentially behind where they could have been. Adrian Newey is of course a genius car designer and could well be the engineer to find the element that results in the Red Bull being the fastest car, but the other teams have had longer and also have world-class designers. Hence for me, I've got Red Bull dropping to third in the Constructors' Championship. Number 2, Mercedes. Mercedes next, and this is a risk given they've won the last 8 Constructors' titles in a row. They're also a team that stopped bringing new parts to their 2021 Challenger halfway through the season, despite the competition that Red Bull were offering. They did this to ensure they had an opportunity to come back stronger this year, and given the way that the team is set up and their power unit strength, I think they've got a very good chance of doing so. The team have seen some change through the off-season, as they've replaced Valtteri Bottas for George Russell, and that should mean that they have a stronger pairing, but there remains a concern over whether they'll end up tripping each other up. But overall, for me, I think they'll do enough to end up second in the Constructors. Number 1, Ferrari. And that means that for the first time since 2008, I think Ferrari will be the Constructors' Champions this year. They've been looking to recover from the lows of 2020, where their power unit was the worst on the grid by far, and subsequently the upgrades that they brought to their engine in the back end of 2021 was a big improvement, and saw them get well clear of McLaren. The Ferrari team is one that is synonymous with Formula 1, and they are the most successful team. So for me, it's only a matter of time before they reach the top once again. And in Leclaire and Sainz, they definitely have the strongest driver pairing. So therefore, I'm backing them to come out on top in 2022. Drivers' Championship predictions. Number 20, Nikita Mazapin. On to the Drivers' Championship now, and this is where it gets even trickier, as I have to try and match the drivers' finishing positions roughly to where I think the teams will be ending up as well. And in last place is Nikita Mazapin. While he did improve through his debut season, I think that if he has the worst car on the grid, I'm struggling to see how he can improve and move up in the standings. I expect he'll be comfortably beaten by his teammate this year, but I also do hope that he's able to score some points, as that would mean that we've probably had quite a good season within the midfield at least. Number 19, Guan Yu Zhou. Next up is this year's only rookie, Guan Yu Zhou. I think the Chinese driver is ready for the step up onto the F1 grid, and he's in a brilliant place to start in Formula 1. The likes of Kimi Raikkonen, Charles Leclerc, and even Sebastian Vettel have actually come through this team at the outset of their careers, so he's in a good place where he should be well supported. He has a negative reputation already with his pay driver label, but for me, I think he's a talented driver and definitely capable of achieving some good results. Having said this, I'm not backing Alfa Romeo, and I don't think he'll be able to beat Valtteri Bottas over the course of the year, hence he sits 19th. Number 18, Mick Schumacher. Schumacher next, and I'm expecting more from the German driver this season. He's got a huge amount of potential, and historically has always done very well in his second season in a new category. In the junior formula, this has meant winning the title, which is obviously unrealistic this year. But he's definitely capable of making a real impact on the sport, as Charles Leclerc did in 2018 with Alfa Romeo. With the right season, at Haas, he could easily put the pressure on Ferrari to make sure he's knocking on the door for a drive there in the near future. Number 17, Nicolas Latifi. Next up is the first of the Williams drivers in Nicolas Latifi. I think the Canadian driver has been making steady progress in the sport so far, and he's earned his seat at Williams for this season. However, up against Alex Albon, I feel like he could struggle given his teammate has recently had experience in the Red Bull. But with 17th for Latifi, I'm hopeful that the cars will be competitive with each other at this end of the grid, but time will tell on that one. Number 16, Valtteri Bottas. Bottas next, and I think it was a great move from Alfa Romeo to bring the Finnish driver into the team. He's got a wealth of experience in the sport and 5 years experience at the strongest team in the sport in recent times. So my main worry for Bottas though is that historically he struggled to get overtakes done whenever he's dropped into the midfield pack, at least in the Mercedes. This could have been because that Mercedes car was designed to lead races rather than sit in a midfield pack, but it raises the question of whether the new aerodynamic principle of Venturi tunnels could actually help the Finn, but he'll need to work hard to achieve it. Number 15, Esteban Ocon. Ocon next, and as I've mentioned already, I have some concerns about the Alpine team. I think the French driver has done very well in recent times and has shown he's capable of competing with the likes of Alonso and Perez so far in his career. But this year, I worry he might end up off the pace when compared with his teammate. Hence, I've got Ocon sat in 15th, suggesting that the Alpine team will be in that battle with the likes of Williams. Number 14, Alex Albon. And talking of Williams, next up is Alex Albon. I suggest he's going to grab his second chance at Formula 1 with both hands. It's rare that drivers get another shot, and Albon certainly deserves it, having been dropped from the Red Bull team so late in 2020. I think Albon will do well in the Williams and use it as an opportunity to bed himself into that team. He could well find himself moving up the order with that team over the next few years as well, as they look to get back into the midfield pack. Number 13, Yuki Sonoda. Sonoda next in 13th, and I think Yuki needs a strong season if he wants to hold on to his F1 seat. He showed good signs of progress towards the end of last year after a shaky start. The Japanese driver is certainly capable, and is still incredibly young at just 21 years old, so he has a huge amount of potential. But the Red Bull Academy is a ruthless place to be, and he'll need to prove himself in this new era. Being up against Pierre Gasly doesn't make it easy by any means, given the Frenchman has so much experience in the sport, in the AlphaTauri team. So for me, I'm hopeful of continued improvement for Sonoda and 13th in the standings. Number 12, Lance Stroll. Stroll next, and this is quite a straightforward one for me, as I think Aston Martin will be sat very much in the midfield pack, and potentially at the front. But for me, I think the Canadian driver will continue to be just behind his more experienced teammate, just as he was last year. The Aston Martin 2022 car has been released already at the time of recording, and it looks very different from his rivals, so who knows whether that will be good or bad. But for me, Stroll will probably end up just behind Vettel this year. Number 11, Sebastian Vettel. And Vettel is next on this list. As I've mentioned with Stroll, I expect the Aston Martin to be in the middle of the pack. I think Vettel has a lot riding on this 2022 season as he's backing the Aston Martin project. But if the team isn't able to show signs of progression, I think this could well be his last year in F1. If he does end up 11th, I'll be interested to know if this is enough for the four-time champ. Number 10, Fernando Alonso. It remains to be seen whether this new era will be suited to any drivers in particular, but it feels to me that a driver that's definitely capable of clever wheel-to-wheel racing is Fernando Alonso. Last year he returned to the sport and definitely made an impact. Despite his age, he's still able to achieve great results. I don't have too much hope for Alpine, but I certainly back Alonso, hence I've got him sat in 10th. It's perhaps a risk, but it's now or never for the Spaniard to try and get his third title. Number 9, Pierre Gasly. Gasly's in 9th for me, and I think the Frenchman does need to start thinking about his exit strategy from the Red Bull programme. I've said it on many occasions, but I don't think staying in the AlphaTauri team is good long term for any driver, but his alternate options would be unlikely to allow him to move up the order. I have no doubt in Gasly's ability though, hence he's 4 spots higher on this list than his teammate. Number 8, Sergio Perez. Into the top 8 now, and this is for the top 4 teams on the grid. In 8th though, I've gone for Sergio Perez. I've made a video in the off-season highlighting why Perez has been excellent for the Red Bull team and was critical in the success that they achieved with Verstappen in 2021. However, I fear for that team and for their car. They spent a large amount of resource on their 2021 Challenger, and this is likely to have had a detrimental impact on 2022. Perhaps the Red Bull team have leaned on their ties with AlphaTauri, but this remains to be seen. If they do have a challenging car, I think Perez could struggle. Hence he's at the back of the front runners for me. Number 7, Lando Norris. Norris next, and despite beating Ricardo last year, I have a feeling he may end up behind the Australian driver this year. He secured a long-term extension with McLaren, which is likely to have been a lucrative deal given his performances last year. However, it will be the first significant rule change for Norris, and that could mean he takes a little bit longer to get up to speed. And given how close I'm optimistically saying it's going to be in 2022, that could mean Norris loses out. Number 6, Daniel Ricciardo. But he won't lose out too much as I have Norris's teammate Ricardo in 6th. The Australian driver has a lot to prove in 2022, but he definitely improved in his second season with Renault, and I have no doubt that he'll be able to do the same with McLaren this year. Ricardo's talent is certainly still there, and given the cars can run closer together this year, I reckon we might see a return of those trademark late braking moves, and they could even be more lucrative in this new era. Number 5. George Russell. Russell next, and this was a really tough one, as I expect he'll do well in his first year with Mercedes. But he's in a new environment, and he, like Norris, is facing a significant change in regulations for the first time in his F1 career. I think Russell will be willing to support Hamilton if the 7-time champion gets ahead, and this could mean he loses out. Number 4. Max Verstappen. Verstappen next, and I think despite putting him in 4th, I think we could be seeing another incredible season from the Dutchman. No matter what the Red Bull car offers him, I can see him extracting the absolute maximum from it, and ending up as far up the order as he possibly can. The Red Bull team have kept their cards very close to their chest this year, so it'll be interesting to see how they get on. But they certainly have one of the best drivers on the grid in Max Verstappen. Number 3. Charles Leclerc. Leclerc next, and this was a tough one as I've put him behind his teammate in the standings. They finished very close to each other in 2021, and this year I'm expecting much of the same. Leclerc is a very talented driver, but he's up against another talent in Sainz who's reaching the prime of his career. Having said this, I'm expecting the Ferrari car to be very strong, and therefore Leclerc could be in a title fight this year, which would be great to watch. Number 2. Carlos Sainz. Sainz then just loses out for me in the drivers' standings as he comes second. Sainz has been the breakout star in 2021, and so many people have been ignoring the obvious talent that the Spaniard has for years, ever since he joined the grid alongside Verstappen. However, since moving to McLaren and now subsequently Ferrari, he's gone from strength to strength. He's got a great mentor in his father, and I think he could well become the lead Ferrari driver in 2022, but I think he'll miss out on the title as the two Ferraris will be so close on track together and they could potentially trip each other up. Number 1. Lewis Hamilton. And finally, I've put Lewis Hamilton as the championship winner. I believe Mercedes will produce a car that's capable of winning races. And, in the hands of Lewis Hamilton, winning races is going to be more likely given the driver is going to be more determined than ever after losing last year's championship on the final lap. In addition, as I've said already, I think the two Ferrari drivers will be at a similar level and could well hinder each other's chances, whereas I believe George Russell will be more willing to be the second driver to Hamilton as he gets up to speed with the Mercedes team. As I've said already, these predictions will be wrong, of course they will, but make sure you stay tuned to Behind the Drive throughout the season to hear my thoughts on the 2022 season.